Go and get an apple. Not later, now if you can. Take it out of the bowl and hold it. It is firm. The skin is tight. There is no give under your thumb, no wrinkling at the shoulders, no soft patch near the stalk. It looks like something that was on a tree recently. Now look at the calendar. British apples are harvested in a window that runs roughly from late August into October. That is when the crop comes off the trees in Kent and Herefordshire and Somerset. It is a short season, and it is the only season there is because apple trees in this country fruit once a year like every other apple tree on earth. So if it is not autumn where you are and that apple came from Britain, then that apple has been somewhere for months. And the entire reason it does not look like it has been anywhere for months, the reason it is still firm, still tight, still convincingly recent in your hand, is the subject of today's video. Because it is not luck and it is not simply refrigeration. There is a specific technology and then there is a specific chemical, and the chemical is the part that genuinely stopped me when I found it. Here is what I want you to hold on to for the next 20 minutes. There is a category of room in this country and across every fruit-growing region on the planet where fruit is not exactly being stored. Storing something implies the thing continues to exist as itself quietly while time passes. That is not what happens in these rooms. In these rooms, the fruit is switched off, not slowed, not chilled, switched off. Its ability to receive its own ripening instruction is chemically blocked, using a compound applied at a dose I'm going to give you in exact parts per billion in a sealed room for exactly 24 hours. The apple is still alive. It simply cannot hear the signal telling it to become older. I will explain precisely how that works, precisely what it is called, and precisely which varieties are approved for it in this country. Nothing in this video is illegal, hidden, or even controversial inside the industry. All of it is published. Almost none of it is known by the people eating the fruit. And at the end I will give you the method, the actual practical way to work out roughly how old the produce in your trolley is, using nothing but what is legally required to be printed on the packaging. Now, this one is different from the first 3 pages of the ledger, and I want to say why before we start. On day 1 we did dairy and proved the premium and the budget product carried the same establishment number. On day 2 we did the pantry and proved the same. On day 3, we did meat and found farms that do not exist. Every one of those worked because you cannot see the thing you are buying. You cannot look at butter and deduce a factory. You cannot look through a tin. You cannot inspect a chicken's life through cling film. The packaging was filling a gap in your knowledge, and the gap was the whole opportunity. The fresh aisle is not like that. The fresh aisle is the one part of the supermarket where the product is right there. Unwrapped in many cases. You can pick it up, turn it over, smell it, squeeze it. There is no packet doing the talking. It is just an apple and your own eyes, which is exactly why this one is more interesting. Because when the customer can see the product, you cannot deceive them with the label. You have to work on the product itself. Let's start with the room. Ordinary air is about 21% oxygen. That number matters more than almost anything else in this story, because oxygen is what a picked fruit uses to keep living. A harvested apple is not an object. It is still respiring, taking in oxygen, breaking down its own sugars, releasing carbon dioxide. It is slowly consuming itself. That process is what we experience as an apple going soft, then floury, then wrinkled, then over. So the entire science of long-term fruit storage comes down to one question. How far can you slow that respiration without killing the fruit? The answer is astonishingly far. The technique is called controlled atmosphere storage, and it has been in commercial use since the middle of the last century. A sealed, gas-tight chamber is loaded with fruit. The room is then closed and the composition of the air inside it is deliberately altered. Oxygen is pulled down from that ambient 21% to as low as 1%. Carbon dioxide is held at a set level. Temperature is kept just above freezing, in the region of 0 to 1 degree Celsius for many varieties. And then the door stays shut. Think about what 1% oxygen means. That is not a cold room. That is an atmosphere no human being could walk into and survive, and that is not an exaggeration for effect. Controlled atmosphere stores are confined spaces with strict entry procedures because the air in them will not sustain a person. Inside that atmosphere, the apple's respiration falls to a fraction of its normal rate. It is not dead. It is not frozen. It is idling at the lowest speed it can idle without suffocating, in a room engineered to keep it exactly on that edge for as long as commercially useful. Modern systems have gone further still. Some now dynamically sense the fruit's own stress response and adjust the oxygen level in real time, pushing it as low as the fruit will physiologically tolerate, backing off the instant the fruit signals distress and holding it there. The room is, in a meaningful sense, negotiating with the apple. And the headline figure from the industry's own literature is this: with proper technique, many apple varieties can be stored for 12 months or longer in controlled atmosphere. 12 months, a full turn of the year, which means it is entirely possible to eat an apple in August that was on a tree the previous August, and for that apple to be perfectly good, perfectly safe, and completely indistinguishable to you from one picked last week. Before I show you the chemical, and this is the part I actually want you to hear, 30 seconds. The Food Ledger UK is a new channel, and this video took the longest of any so far because horticultural storage science is written for growers, not shoppers. Everything you're about to hear came from published best practice guides, industry technical documents, government horticulture statistics, and regulatory records. All public, all free, all effectively invisible unless somebody reads it for you. I am trying to get this channel to 5,000 subscribers, not 100,000 and 5,000. That is the number at which this becomes sustainable enough to keep doing properly. If you have learned one thing in the last 7 minutes that you did not know when you clicked, press subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it is the entire difference between this continuing and this quietly stopping. 5,000. Now let me tell you about the chemical, because this is the part of the video I most want people to know. Controlled atmosphere slows the fruit down. But there is a second layer, and the second layer does something categorically different. Fruit ripens because of a gas it produces itself. That gas is ethylene. It is a plant hormone, and in ripening fruit, it works as a signal. The fruit generates ethylene. The ethylene binds to receptor sites in the fruit's own cells, and that binding is the instruction that triggers the whole cascade of ripening. Softening, color change, starch converting to sugar, the flesh breaking down. Ethylene is the message. The receptors are the inbox. Now, there is a compound called 1-methylcyclopropene. In the trade it is sold under the name Smart Fresh, and it is a routine part of commercial apple storage in this country. What it does is this: the molecule closely resembles ethylene, closely enough that the fruit's receptors accept it. So it binds to those receptor sites, and then it simply sits there. The receptors are occupied, the inbox is full. The fruit goes on producing ethylene exactly as it always did, because nothing has been done to the fruit's chemistry, but the message has nowhere to land. The instruction is being sent and it is not being received. The apple does not know it is supposed to be ripening. Here is how it is actually applied, and the specifics are extraordinary in their ordinariness. It arrives as a powder. Water is added to the powder, which releases the compound as a gas. A battery-driven pump circulates it through the sealed store. The applicator is left in the closed room for approximately 24 hours. The standard protocol calls for 625 parts per billion, calculated against the empty volume of the store. 625 parts per billion. That is the dose. That is what it takes to switch off a room full of fruit. And the varieties approved for use in the United Kingdom are named openly in the industry's own best practice guidance: Bramley, Cameo, Cox, Egremont Russet, Empire, Gala, Golden Delicious, Jonagold, Rubens, and Spartan. Read that list again. Those are not exotic imports. That is the British apple isle. That is Bramley, the cooking apple in your crumble. That is Cox and Egremont Russet, the two varieties most people in this country would name if you asked them to name a proper English apple. Now, I want to be scrupulously fair here because this channel is worth nothing if it exaggerates. This treatment leaves no residue on the fruit and none in the environment. That is stated plainly in the technical guidance, and I have no reason to dispute it. It is approved, regulated, and used across the global fruit trade. It is not a hidden additive, and it is not a food safety issue. It also does something genuinely valuable. It substantially reduces waste in a supply chain where waste is measured in hundreds of thousands of tons. I'm not telling you this because it is dangerous. I'm telling you because you did not know, and because the entire commercial value of it depends on you not knowing. The purpose of the technology is to make a 9-month-old apple present to your hand and your eye as a recent one. That is not a side effect. That is the specification. And here is where I have to correct something you may have heard elsewhere, including in my own teaser for this video, because the 12-month figure needs context. The published storage recommendations for British-grown varieties under British best practice guidance are considerably tighter than 12 months, and they vary enormously by variety. Cox is recommended for storage of up to around 3 months, taking it to roughly late March. Braeburn similar. Gala and Golden Delicious up to around 4 months. Jonagold up to about 6, and Bramley, the culinary apple, the one bred to hold together in a pie, up to around 8 months, which under those guidelines takes it all the way through to August. So the honest position is this: A British Cox on the shelf in April is a stored apple, but it is a few months old stored apple. A British Bramley in July has plausibly been in a sealed low-oxygen room since the previous autumn for the better part of a year, and that is not a scandal. That is the published, intended, entirely normal industry practice. The 12-month-plus figure is real, but it belongs to the global trade and the best storing varieties under optimal conditions, not to every apple in every British shop. I would rather give you the smaller true number than the bigger exciting one, because the smaller true number is the one you can actually use. Now let me do the fruit where there is no ambiguity at all, where every single one you have ever eaten went through the process. Bananas. A banana is never, under any circumstances, ripened on the plant for the export trade. Not sometimes. Never. It is harvested green, hard, starchy, and completely inedible in that state, because a ripe banana cannot survive being shipped. It is then loaded into refrigerated containers and held at around 13 degrees Celsius for the ocean crossing. 13 degrees is not arbitrary. It is a deliberately chosen holding temperature, cold enough to suppress ripening for weeks, warm enough to avoid chilling injury, which turns the skin grey and ruins the fruit. The entire voyage is a balancing act on that number. Then it arrives and it goes into a ripening room. The room is sealed and brought to around 17 degrees. Ethylene, the same ripening hormone we just discussed, is pumped into the room at roughly 1 part per million, and the fruit is left in that atmosphere for about 24 hours. The room is then ventilated, and the bananas are left for a further 3 to 4 days. And this is the detail that I think is genuinely remarkable. The length of that final period is set according to what the customer has ordered. A supermarket does not order bananas. It orders bananas at a specified point on a color scale, timed to arrive at a specified ripeness on a specified day, so that they present correctly on the shelf for the days they will sit there. The exact shade of yellow of the bananas in your fruit bowl was a purchase order, which means that when you stand in front of the display and choose the bunch with the faintest green at the tips, thinking you are picking the freshest, you are not selecting for freshness. You are selecting a point on a curve that was initiated in a sealed room by a gas on a schedule for you. And now I want to hear from you because I cannot check every shelf in this country, and you can. Here is the task, and it takes 2 minutes. Go to your fruit bowl or your next shop. Find any apple or pear. Look for the country of origin. It is legally required to be there on the sticker, on the bag, or on the shelf edge label. Note the country, note the variety if it is given, and note today's date. Then work out the hemisphere. If it is British or European and we are past about March, you are holding stored fruit. If it says New Zealand, Chile, or South Africa and it is our spring, you are holding Southern Hemisphere fruit from their recent harvest, which has crossed the world but is genuinely young. Put what you find in the comments, the country, the variety, and the month. I read these properly, and the last 2 videos have had people send in things that ended up in my research notes. If enough of us do it, we will have built a rough public map of what is actually on British shelves and when. And answer me one more thing, because I want to know whether this is universal. Have you ever thrown away fruit that was still perfectly good purely because a date on the packet told you to? I have done it more times than I want to admit. Say yours. Right. Potatoes, because this one is bigger than most people realize. Britain puts roughly 3.5 million tons of potatoes into storage every year. Not thousands of tons, millions. The main crop is lifted in autumn and it has to feed the country until the following summer, which means the average British potato spends a very long time in a shed. And a potato in a shed wants to do one thing above all others: sprout. It is not a vegetable in the botanical sense. It is a tuber, an underground storage organ whose entire biological purpose is to sit through the winter and then grow a new plant. Sprouting is not the potato going bad. It is the potato doing exactly what it exists to do. So for decades, the industry stopped it chemically. The dominant sprout suppressant was a compound called chlorprophene, known throughout the trade as CIPC, and it was applied to a very large proportion of that stored crop. Then European regulators declined to renew its approval, and the maximum grace period for use, storage and disposal ran to the 8th of October 2020. After that, the compound that had underpinned the British potato store for a generation was gone. What replaced it is, I think, more interesting than what it replaced. The industry moved to a set of volatile alternatives with names that sound almost wholesome: spearmint oil, orange oil, a compound called 1,4-dimethylnaphthalene, which is naturally present in potatoes themselves, and ethylene, yes, the same ripening hormone again, this time used the other way round, because in potatoes a controlled ethylene atmosphere suppresses sprouting rather than triggering it. One of those, the dimethylnaphthalene product, had its first authorized season in Great Britain only in 2022 and 2023, which means the humble bag of potatoes in your cupboard sits on top of a regulatory upheaval, a scramble for replacement chemistry, and an active technical debate inside British agriculture that has been running for the last 5 years. And absolutely none of that appears anywhere on the bag. Now the bagged salad, which is where I want to be most careful because there is a lot of nonsense talked about this and I do not want to add to it. Bagged leaves are washed before packing. That washing typically uses chlorinated water, the same principle and often lower concentrations than the chlorination used in public drinking water. When the British industry body was challenged on this, it commissioned independent testing and reported that where chlorination byproducts were detectable at all, they were measurable only in parts per billion, substantially below World Health Organization health guideline levels, and in the majority of samples, nothing was detected at all. I have looked at the objections and I think the industry has the better of this argument. The leaves are grown in open fields, in soil exposed to wildlife. They are sold ready to eat, straight from the bag without further washing. Something has to make that safe, and chlorinated water is the same technology that makes tap water safe. The second thing that happens is modified atmosphere packaging, used on around a fifth of salad packs. It is the same principle as the apple room, shrunk down to the size of a bag. Oxygen inside the pack is reduced, respiration slows, the leaves stay presentable for longer. That is why a bag of leaves puffs slightly, and why it collapses and deteriorates within a day or two of being opened. Opening it ends the atmosphere. The industry has also pushed back on claims that this destroys nutritional value, arguing that the study behind those claims compared several-day-old packaged salad against freshly harvested whole lettuce, which is not a like-for-like comparison. That is a fair criticism, and I'm including it because a channel that only reports the damning half is not a ledger, it is a campaign. So let me say the honest thing, which is the thing I think actually matters here. Almost nothing in this video is wrong. Controlled atmosphere storage is not a trick. It is one of the most significant food preservation achievements of the 20th century, and without it, the fruit aisle in February would be close to empty. Ethylene management is not an adulteration. It is thermodynamics and plant physiology used competently. Sprout suppression stops millions of tons of food being thrown away. The chlorine in the salad bag is why you are not ill. The problem is not any individual technology. The problem is one word: fresh, because fresh has no legal definition tied to time. There is no threshold. There is no maximum number of days between a fruit leaving the tree and the shop being permitted to call it fresh. What exists in this country is guidance on marketing terms like fresh, natural, and pure, and guidance is guidance. It is not a statutory limit, and there is no register you can check a claim again, Saint, so the word does all the work, and it carries none of the obligation. It is doing exactly what Willow Farms did in the last video, and exactly what Taste the Difference did in the one before. It is a feeling printed where you expect a fact. And here is the part that puts a flaw under the whole system, from the government's own horticulture statistics. Home-produced fruit accounted for around 14% of total UK supply in 2025. 14. That is down from 15% the year before. Fruit imports rose more than 8% to 3.6 million tonnes. Vegetables are healthier, around 56% home-produced, up 2 points on the year with imports still running at over 2 million tonnes. 14%. That is the number that explains everything else in this video. If Britain grows around 1/7 of the fruit it eats, and the domestic crop arrives in a single autumn window, then a year-round fresh fruit aisle is only possible through two mechanisms: importing from the opposite hemisphere and storing the domestic crop for as long as physics allows. There is no third option. The technology is not there to fool you. It is there because the alternative is empty shelves for 8 months. Which brings me to the thing I find hardest to be angry about, and the thing that is quietly the strangest development in this whole story. Between the summer and autumn of 2022, several of Britain's biggest supermarkets removed best before dates from fresh fruit and vegetables. One removed them from around 85% of its fresh produce range from mid-July. Another removed them from roughly 500 lines from September. Others followed. And the reason was good. Genuinely, unambiguously good. Household food waste in this country is enormous. Hundreds of thousands of tons of fresh vegetables and fresh fruit thrown away every year, running to billions of pounds. And a great deal of it is thrown away not because it has gone off, but because a printed date said so, while the food itself was perfectly fine. Removing the date and asking people to use their eyes and their nose is, on the evidence, the right call. I support it. But notice what it also did. The best before date was never a statement of age. It never told you when the fruit was picked, but it was the last remaining number on the packaging that had any relationship with time at all. It was a crude, indirect, one-directional signal, and now on a large proportion of British fresh produce, it is gone. So we have arrived somewhere genuinely odd. A storage system capable of holding fruit in suspension for the better part of a year. A chemical that blocks the fruit's ability to perceive its own ripening. Packaging that is legally required to tell you the country, but never the date of harvest. A word, fresh, with no time limit attached to it. And now, for good environmental reasons, the removal of the only date that was ever printed. Every one of those decisions is defensible on its own. Together, they add up to a fresh produce aisle where the age of the food is, for the ordinary shopper, entirely unknowable. So here is the method. This is the practical part, and it genuinely works. First, country of origin. It is legally required on fresh produce, and it is the single most useful thing on the label. Find it every time. Second, match the origin to the season. Northern Hemisphere produce, British, French, Polish, Dutch, bought outside its harvest window, is stored produce. British apples harvested in September and bought in May have been somewhere for 8 months. Southern Hemisphere produce, New Zealand, Chile, South Africa, Peru, bought during our spring and early summer, is arriving from their recent harvest and is very often genuinely younger than the British fruit sitting next to it. That will feel wrong because one of them has a Union Jack on the shelf edge label. It is still true. Third, know your varieties. A Bramley in high summer has been stored a long time by design. A Cox in April is at the outer edge of its recommended window. Fourth, assume the banana. Every banana always without exception. There is no such thing as an unripened room banana in a British supermarket. And fifth, the one that costs you nothing. Use the calendar as your date code. Fruit does not have a printed harvest date, but it does have a season, and the season is public knowledge. Origin plus month is your best before date. It is not precise. It is far better than nothing, and it is more than the packaging will ever give you. Which leaves one last thread, and it has been nagging at me the whole time I was writing this. Everything today came down to a single word, doing work it is not legally required to justify. Fresh. But there is one place in the supermarket where they do not merely imply freshness. They make a claim about a specific event, on a specific day, in that specific building. There is a smell engineered to reach you from the door. There is a counter, and there are trays, and there are frequently signs using words like baked today and freshly baked in store, the in-store bakery. So ask the question we have now asked 4 times and see how it feels in this context. Baked today, yes, but made today? Where did the dough come from? Was it mixed in that building, or did it arrive in that building already formed, already proved, already partially baked and frozen? How long had it been frozen? Weeks? Months? Is a loaf that was made in a factory in the autumn, frozen, shipped and finished in an oven at the back of a supermarket in the spring, allowed to be described as freshly baked? And if the answer to that last question is yes, which I think you can already guess, then what exactly is the word bakery describing? That is the next page of the ledger. The in-store bakery, the frozen dough trade, what baked today legally means, and why the smell is coming from a vent. Before then, do the origin, taste, country and month on any piece of fruit you own. Bring it to the comments. And the next time you pick up an apple and it feels firm and tight and recent in your hand, that firmness is not an accident, and it is not a coincidence. Somebody engineered it in a sealed room at 625 parts per billion so that it would feel exactly like that when you picked it up. It is not lying to you. It just isn't telling you. The food ledger is open.